The sea keeps secrets. Some are buried in the deep. Others drift forever, waiting to be found. This is the story of a ship that wouldn't sink, and 25 souls who vanished without a trace. October 1955. The South Pacific stretched endlessly blue. Warm water, clear skies. Paradise, they called it. But paradise has its own darkness, and sometimes people sail into it and don't come back. The MV Joyita wasn't new. She'd been built in 1931 in Los Angeles. A luxury yacht once, sleek, elegant, expensive, 70 feet long, wooden hull, twin diesel engines. During World War II, they converted her. She became a patrol boat for the US Navy. After the war, she changed hands. Again and again. By 1955, she was working the South Pacific. Charter work, freight, whatever paid. Her paint was faded, her machinery tired. But she had one thing going for her. Her hull was lined with cork. Thousands of pounds of it, packed into every void space. Even if she flooded, she would float. Unsinkable, they said. The engineers were certain. She could never go down. Thomas Henry Miller captained the Joyita. Everyone called him Dusty. He was 44 years old, tall, confident, experienced. He'd been at sea since he was young. Merchant ships, cargo runs, island routes. He knew the Pacific, like other men knew their hometown streets. He'd taken command of the Joyita 2 years earlier, made her his own, ran a tight ship, but there were whispers. Some said Dusty cut corners, took risks. The Joyita wasn't in the best shape. Maintenance was expensive. Money was tight. The port engine had been giving trouble for months, misfiring, losing power, running rough. But it always started, and that was enough, until it wasn't. Still, she sailed, week after week, year after year. Nothing had gone seriously wrong. Not yet. October 3rd, 1955, Monday morning. The Joyita sat at her mooring in Apia Harbour, Samoa. Cargo was being loaded. Supplies, medical equipment, building materials. The destination, the Tokelau Islands, a tiny chain of atolls, 3 small islands, barely on the map. About 270 miles north of Samoa. 2 days sailing, maybe less if the weather held. It was a routine run, nothing special, but this trip, there would be passengers, 9 of them, more than usual, a government official, a copra buyer, several workers, and a doctor, Dr. A.D. Parsons. He was going to set up a clinic on the islands. He brought his medical supplies, his instruments, everything he'd need. The crew numbered 16. Most were local men, Samoan, Fijian, from the islands, experienced sailors. They knew these waters. They'd made this trip before. By late afternoon, everything was loaded, the supplies secured, the passengers settled in. Captain Miller checked the weather. Looked good. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas ahead. He gave the order. They cast off just before sunset. The Joyita moved out of the harbour. Her engines rumbled. Her wake spread white behind her. People on shore watched her go. Just another ship, just another voyage. They turned away, went back to their lives. They didn't know they'd never see her again. Not like that, not whole. October 5th, Wednesday. The Joyita should have arrived in Tokelau. She didn't. At first, no one worried too much. Weather delays happened. Engine trouble happened. Ships ran a few hours late, all the time. But by Thursday, concern grew. The Joyita had a radio. She should have called in. Standard procedure. Every captain did it. But the radio stayed silent. Friday came. Still nothing. By Saturday, families were asking questions. Where was the ship? Where was the crew? Had anyone heard from them? The answer was always the same. No. On Sunday, a search began. Aircraft took off from Fiji, from Samoa. They flew grid patterns, scanned the ocean below, looking for wreckage, lifeboats, anything. The sea stretched empty beneath them. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. The search area expanded. More planes, more ships. Nothing. The families waited, hoped, prayed. But hope has a weight, and time makes it heavier. By late October, the search was scaled back. By early November, most believed the Joyita was lost. Another ship, swallowed by the Pacific. Another list of names added to the missing. The sea had taken them completely, and that should have been the end. November 10th, 1955. 5 weeks after the Joyita left port. The merchant vessel Tuvalu was heading south. Routine cargo run. Nothing unusual. The lookout was scanning the horizon. Sea, sky, more sea. Then he saw something. A shape, dark against the water. At first, he thought it was wreckage, but as they got closer, he realized it was a ship, adrift, alone, listing heavily to one side. The captain brought the Tuvalu around. They came alongside, read the name on the hull. Joyita, the ship everyone had been looking for, 600 miles off course, more than twice the distance of her original voyage, floating like a ghost. They called out. No response. The Tuvalu's crew launched a boat. 4 men rowed across, climbed aboard. What they found would haunt them. The Joyita was half submerged. Her starboard side sat low in the water. The decks were awash. Waves sloshed over the railings, but she was still afloat, still drifting. The boarding party moved carefully. Water everywhere, slippery, unstable. They called out. Their voices echoed strangely. No answer, no movement, nothing. The ship was empty. 25 people, gone. They went below, into the cabins, the galley, the engine room. Everything looked abandoned mid-moment, like everyone had just stood up and walked away. In the galley, food, bread, tins of meat, fresh fruit, starting to rot, plates on the table, cups half filled with coffee, cold, days old, untouched. Personal belongings everywhere, clothes laid out, shaving kits, a child's toy, suitcases packed, but never taken, books left open, pages swollen with damp. The crew's quarters were the same. Beds made, some unmade, all empty. In one cabin, a doctor's bag, open, bandages scattered, instruments laid out, like someone had been treating an injury, then stopped. The engine room was flooded waist deep. Seawater sloshed with the ship's movement. The pumps were off. The engines cold. But here's what was strange. The ship was still floating, even with all that water inside. She wouldn't sink. The cork lining, holding her up, just like the engineers said it would. They searched the ship thoroughly, looking for clues, for anything that made sense. Navigational equipment, gone. Sextant, charts chronometer, missing. The ship's logbook, also missing. Every captain kept a log. It was required. But the Joyita's was nowhere to be found. The radio was dead, corroded from seawater. But someone had touched it recently. It was tuned to 2,182 kilohertz, the international distress frequency. Someone had tried to call for help. The message never went out. In the deck house, blood, not much, a few spots on a seat cushion. More on the deck, dried brown, old, and fabric, a piece of cloth with more blood on it, like a bandage or a rag used to stop bleeding. The awning over the deck house was torn, ripped, shredded in places. One of the masts damaged. The life rafts were still secured to the deck, tied down, unused. But 3 of the ship's 4 boats were missing. Only one remained, empty, still lashed in place. And then, the mattresses, pulled from the cabins, wedged into a breach in the hull above the waterline. A desperate patch job, improvised, temporary. Someone had tried to stop the flooding, tried to keep the ship afloat, and it had worked, partially. The water had gotten in, but not enough. Not enough to sink her. The Tuvalu's crew towed the Joyita to Suva, Fiji. News spread quickly. The ghost ship, the mystery. Newspapers ran headlines. Families demanded answers. Authorities launched an investigation. The Fiji Marine Board, the Western Pacific High Commission. They examined every inch of the vessel, interviewed witnesses, checked records, traced the route, engineers, maritime experts, salvage crews. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. What happened? The investigation revealed problems. The Joyita had been in poor condition before she sailed. The port engine had a cracked cylinder head. It probably failed early in the voyage. The starboard engine's clutch was damaged, slipping badly, barely functional. With only one weak engine, the ship would have been slow, maybe 3 or 4 knots, barely moving. A voyage that should have taken 2 days would have taken much longer. The pumps were old, inefficient. If the hull started taking on water, they might not have kept up. So, the picture became clearer. Sort of. The Joyita left Samoa. The port engine failed. They kept going on one engine, limping along. Then something else went wrong. A leak. Maybe a loose plank. Maybe stress on the hull. Water coming in. Slowly at first, then faster. The crew tried to pump it out. Couldn't keep up. Mattresses stuffed into the breach. Desperate improvisation. It slowed the flooding, but didn't stop it. The ship began to list, settling lower in the water. Captain Miller must have realized they were in trouble. He sent out a distress call, or tried to. But the radio was already damaged, waterlogged. The signal never reached anyone. So, what did they do next? The official theory was simple. They abandoned ship, 25 people, into the small boats. They thought the Joyita was sinking. They made the decision to leave. Captain Miller would have known. Even with the cork lining, a flooding ship is unstable. Better to get everyone off. Get them safe. They launched 3 boats, loaded supplies, set out. Maybe they planned to row to the nearest island. Maybe they hoped to be spotted by another ship. But the Pacific is vast. The boats were small. If the weather turned, if currents pulled them off course, they could have drifted for days, weeks, without water, without food. One by one, they would have weakened, and eventually, the sea would have taken them. No wreckage ever found, no bodies washed ashore. But that doesn't mean much. The ocean is deep, and it doesn't give everything back. Some said it was pirates. The South Pacific had its share, even in 1955. Smugglers, criminals, men who lived outside the law. Maybe they saw the Joyita, disabled, vulnerable, an easy target. They boarded her, took the passengers and crew, took them somewhere, held them, killed them. But there were problems with that theory. Nothing valuable was missing. The cargo was still there. Medical supplies, building materials, all accounted for. Pirates don't leave cargo behind. And there was no sign of violence, no bullet holes, no struggle, just that small amount of blood, which could have been anything. If pirates had taken the ship, they'd have stripped her clean, maybe sunk her after, but the Joyita was still there, still floating, still carrying her cargo. It didn't fit. Another theory. A Japanese fishing boat. There were many in those waters, long-line trawlers, operating legally, sometimes illegally. Maybe one of them hit the Joyita in the night. An accident, a collision neither saw coming. The impact damages the Joyita, starts the leak. The fishing boat's crew realizes what happened. They board the sinking ship, take the passengers and crew, maybe to help, maybe to hide what they'd done. Then they disappear, sail away, say nothing. Later, guilt or fear keeps them silent. They can't report it without admitting their role. So, 25 people vanish, and no one says a word. Possible. Maybe. But no proof. No evidence. No witness. Just speculation. A darker theory emerged. Mutiny. The crew turning on the captain. Maybe there was tension, money problems, unpaid wages. Maybe Captain Miller made a decision someone disagreed with. Things escalated, turned violent. The crew overpowered Miller and the officers. Then what? Took the passengers too? Escaped in the boats? Hard to imagine, but not impossible. Men do strange things under pressure. Fear, anger, desperation. But again, the evidence didn't support it. No signs of struggle, no fight. And why would mutineers leave the ship intact? Why not sink her? The Joyita was a witness, floating evidence. It didn't make sense. The investigation concluded in early 1956. The official finding: unexplained disappearance, likely cause. The crew abandoned ship believing it was sinking, subsequently lost at sea. 25 people declared dead. Families received the news, grieved, tried to move on. The Joyita herself was repaired, sold, put back into service, but her reputation followed her. The ship no one wanted to sail on. The cursed vessel. She ran aground a few years later, near Fiji. This time, no one bothered to save her. They left her there, let the ocean take her slowly, piece by piece, year by year, until nothing remained. More than 70 years have passed now. The mystery has never been solved. Not really. We have theories, we have possibilities, but no answers. 25 people stepped aboard the Joyita that October afternoon. They waved goodbye, sailed into the sunset, and vanished. Some mysteries are neat. They have conclusions. This one doesn't. It sits in the space between logic and impossibility, between what we know and what we'll never know. Maybe the official story is right. Maybe they abandoned ship and were lost. Maybe it was something else, something stranger. Sometimes, the sea takes what it wants, without explanation, without mercy, without trace, and we're left with fragments. A ship that wouldn't sink, a radio tuned to distress, mattresses stuffed in a breach, blood on a cushion, 3 missing boats, and silence. We want to believe everything has an answer, that every disappearance can be explained, that the world is logical, predictable, safe. But the ocean doesn't care what we believe. It doesn't follow our rules. It doesn't owe us explanations. The Joyita drifted for 37 days, alone, empty, waiting, a ship without a crew, a story without an ending, and somewhere beneath those waves, in the dark water, in the deep, 25 people became part of the mystery, not victims, not survivors, just gone. The sea keeps its secrets. Some it whispers back on the tide. Most times, it doesn't, and we're left standing on the shore, staring at the horizon, wondering what happened in those final moments, when the ship began to list, when the water kept rising, when the decision was made to stay or to go, to trust the unsinkable ship or trust the empty boats. We'll never know, and maybe that's the real mystery. Not what happened, but how we live with not knowing. The ocean remembers what we forget, but it never tells.